Former Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, Salam Fayyad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
I want to start with some of what is happening from the U.S. perspective over the course of the past couple of days, and that is a call for Israel to do more to protect civilians in Gaza. What do you make of that call, and what do you think that would look like on the ground?
But that's very important call to make, not today, sooner than when it should have happened, to be honest with you. And I think that's really utmost priority right now. The carnage going on and the way it has been for the past weeks is just something that is not only unprecedented, it is really exacting a very, very heavy toll, in addition to loss of life and, of course, injured, and not to mention those who are buried alive under rubble. People cannot extricate them from it. So the misery is unprecedented, and I think it is high time for that call to be more explicit. What is needed more than anything else is to really bring the carnage to an end, swift end. I know that the Americans have been talking about humanitarian respite of sorts. That's better than nothing. But I think the focus ought to be on bringing the carnage to an end. Thousands of people have perished, and I don't think it should be allowed to continue any longer, given initial expectations or policy as pronounced by the government of Israel, announced by them, eradicate, eliminate, level Gaza off, etc.
Yeah.
That's just really a tall order. Already we have 10,000 people killed, many more injured, and again, I mean, how many more Palestinians would need to perish before the world comes to realize the very important task ahead? The focus ought to be on bringing the carnage to an end, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, and I have lots of questions. Yeah, I have lots of questions about what happens after that. But how important do you think it is for Hamas to release the hostages as part of sort of the beginning of this conflict unwinding?
I think something that can be done swiftly, and I've written about this explicitly. I think it's important to have the civilian captives released as soon as possible. Some of that has happened. I think it's something that needs to be built on. I know that the Israeli government has not been so far in any mood to discuss ceasefire. They're hostile to the idea of ceasefire being talked about. But I think the mere prospect of civilian hostages or captives released is something that I hope would generate enough of a dynamic in the direction of slowing this mad dash to hell, if not stopping it completely. I think it's very important. And I've written about this, and I was explicit on it from day one.
I know you have a lot of views about, and you've had them before this conflict, about what should happen to Gaza. So let's say that the conflict ends at some point. We all hope that happens. What happens next? Who steps into that space of the Gaza Strip? Who controls it? Who governs it? Because it would be hard to imagine that it would continue to be Hamas.
You know, I think it's an important question to ask, for sure, and I think it has been, and it's beginning to be asked, although I think belatedly. I don't understand how objectives of war at the massive scale that has been taking place can be formulated without some thinking as to what's going to happen afterwards.
Sure.
I myself have proposed, have written about this explicitly because I sense there was a conversation beginning to take place, and I wanted to bring into the discourse a Palestinian perspective. Just speaking for myself, without really consulting anyone. These are my views, and I have expressed them on a number of occasions over the past decade or so. But this is an opportunity to really actually try to come up with an idea that's workable and workable quickly, and begins to really respond to the need to manage the affairs of Palestinian people in the territory Israel occupied in 1967, both in Gaza and the West Bank at the same time. So I think it's important. I know that these conversations have been kind of wide-ranging, assuming that there's not going to be Hamas the day after. And I think from the very beginning, I said this is just unattainable to begin with, and it's just really not the way to go. Hamas is a political movement, and you just cannot destroy completely, as the Israelis have been saying from day one, a political movement. Anyone can tell you that. So I think that really has to stop, and I believe some practical ideas as to how to assume the task of managing the affairs of Palestinian people in territory occupied by Israel since 1967 is a very important issue, and it's overdue for consideration, considering the weakness that had befallen the Palestinian Authority over the 3 decades that passed since the signing of Oslo Accords anyway. Yeah. But it's high time for that to really be looked at carefully now, with a lot of what I'm talking about readily doable.
Yeah. The current Palestinian Prime Minister, as I'm sure you know, has said that the Palestinian Authority will not govern Gaza without an agreement that includes the West Bank in a Palestinian state. Is that possible? Do you see a place for the Palestinian Authority to take over in Gaza within those parameters?
You're fundamentally correct, but I think the more important question is the capacity. The question to ask, is the Palestinian Authority as currently constituted and configured, and considering where it is at right now in terms of the degree to which is accepted as a governing authority for the Palestinian people in West Bank, and we're not talking about Gaza yet, is it really able to shoulder that massive responsibility? And the answer to this question, and I gave this explicit in writing, that the Palestinian Authority as currently constituted and configured is not in a position to do that. Even if it were willing to do it, it's not in a position to do it. The capacity is not there. Yeah. But what can do it, and I'm all for it, is a Palestinian Authority that's reconfigured in a way that can make it possible for it to do that, to assume that responsibility. But to just say, like, the day after, all that happens in PA as it is right now moves in and begins to assume responsibility for dealing with the massive task that lies ahead, in terms of, on top of everything else that has been going on for decades now, yeah. The misery that's going to be, that people are going to really have to live with for a long period of time. This is a tall order. And the Palestinian Authority, as it stands now, politically speaking, is not really in a position to be able to handle that responsibility. And that's really quite apart from question of willingness to really do this in the aftermath of such a massive, aggressive war against our people in Gaza.
So let me end on this then, Mr. Fayyad. Do you have a hope? Do you have hope for a path to peace, to a two-state solution, or some kind of peace that could form after this?
I do, but I think it has to really be, there has to be a total overhaul to that process. A process that does not begin with having our national rights as a people recognized, including right to self-determination, including the right to a state on the territory. The right is very important word here, to a state on the territory Israel occupied in 1967, a sovereign state on that territory. We need recognition of that right before we really begin a new process, because for 3 decades we've been running into circles, and what has happened over the past 3 decades is nothing but a more deeply entrenched reality of Israeli occupation that has been nothing but oppressive and extremely capricious.
Mr. Fayyad, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.